talks with Sinn Féin. Gerry Adams says it was worthwhile. As rebel forces enter the Zairean capital, Laurent Kabila proclaims himself head of state. And the Blues have it. Chelsea win the FA Cup final at Wembley. Good evening. Talks have taken place in Dublin between government officials and Sinn Féin. The Taoiseach said he had authorised the meeting to find out if an IRA ceasefire was imminent. Fianna Fáil has welcomed the renewed contact between the government and Sinn Féin, but criticised the Taoiseach for not acting quickly enough. Earlier, the Sinn Féin President, Gerry Adams, accepted an offer from the British Prime Minister, Tony Blair, to meet Westminster officials. That meeting is expected to take place next week.
This morning's meeting with senior civil servants at a secret location in Dublin came just hours after Gerry Adams accepted the British Prime Minister Tony Blair's offer of talks. In Uri this afternoon, Mr. Adams said he didn't want to go into detail about this morning's meeting, but it was worthwhile to engage in honest and constructive dialogue.
But it was a full meeting. We asserted the rights of our electorate. We put forward our view of the urgent need to proceed without delay. There is an opportunity for peace there at this time.
The Sinn Féin leader welcomed the British government's decision to reopen official contacts with his party, but he was very critical at what he described as the large pro-unionist content of yesterday's speech by Mr. Blair.
But I don't want at all to disguise my rejection of the content of a lot of what Mr. Blair said. I do accept that he was setting out his stall, and I think that's fair enough. But I'm an Irish Republican. I want to see the union ended, not strengthened or modified. And while he will come into negotiations with that view, we will come into negotiations with a separate view.
At the same time, a short distance away, Britain's new Defence Minister George Robertson was meeting troops at the British Army base in Bessbrook. Mr. Robinson seemed to agree there has been a de facto IRA ceasefire in place since the shooting of a policewoman in Derry 5 weeks ago.
Well, I can't tell what their intentions are. Clearly, there has been some cessation of some of the violence, but not enough. But what we're looking forward in the future, too, is a complete cessation of violence and the evidence of that. And that will allow the talks to go ahead with some purpose.
This morning's talks with senior civil servants in Dublin and next week's meeting with officials from the British government, probably here in Belfast, it seems the peace process has received the kickstart it so desperately needed. On Monday, Sinn Féin's Martin McGuinness and Gerry Adams will travel to Westminster to challenge Speaker Betty Boothroyd's decision to ban them from using Commons office facilities.
The Taoiseach said this evening that the talks between his officials and Sinn Féin had gone quite well. He said he had allowed the contacts only to explore if there was a genuine prospect of a ceasefire.
The first signal that talks were on between Sinn Féin and government officials came this morning when the Taoiseach, with his wife Finola, visited the Alliance Française in Dublin. Official contacts stopped last December when a police bodyguard of the DUP politician Nigel Dodds was shot in a Belfast hospital. But now the Taoiseach gave the go-ahead for talks.
We're not going to have meetings for the sake of meetings, because that would compromise the safety of this state and its people. But if there is a genuine prospect of a ceasefire, one meeting can be organised to see how we can help to bring that about.
Later, Mr. Bruton continued his election trail with a visit to the Fianna Sports Grounds in Glasnevin. But it was a day for juveniles, and Jason Sherlock was nowhere to be seen. Afterwards, a tour of border counties. In Drogheda, the Taoiseach said the government would continue to help residents of County Louth in their battle against Sellafield. He also expounded on his tax policies, which he said would benefit all income groups and give everybody more take-home pay. By the end of his visit to County Louth, the talks with Sinn Féin had ended, and he said they had gone quite well.
Obviously, this is a process, and the next stage is the meeting that Sinn Féin proposed to have with the British government officials, and we'd have to see how that goes before we can make any conclusion.
Do you feel that a ceasefire is close?
Well, it's possible. We only authorised the meeting because that possibility existed, and we're obviously working towards that end because we do want everybody around the table We want a solution that will be comprehensive and represents everybody, because that's the only way a solution will endure.
The Fianna Fáil leader Bertie Ahern has welcomed the Taoiseach's decision to sanction a meeting between government officials and Sinn Féin. Speaking in County Clare, Mr Ahern said once the British Prime Minister decided on a meeting, the Taoiseach was left with no alternative but to follow suit.
And I'm 100% behind.
Thanks very much.
I really am.
You'll be home for the election.
The first full day of Bertie Ahern's nationwide election tour took him west of the Shannon to the Banner County of Clare. It was here in Shannon that the party decided to launch its tourism policy for Campaign 97. In Ennis this afternoon, whether because of the football final or election apathy, the crowds weren't particularly large. But any disappointment in the turnout was certainly made up by the warmth of the welcome for Bertie Ahern.
Welcome, Bertie. Welcome.
Modern election tactics may be taking the spontaneity out of the campaign, but in Ennis, Mr Ahern was encouraged to say the few words.
You people who are committed to the Fianna Fáil organisation to do your level best in this election to win us the third seat.
On Northern Ireland, Mr Ahern also criticised the government for their stance on talks with Sinn Féin.
I couldn't understand the reluctance in the first place, and the fact that the Taoiseach has now followed what I asked him to do on Wednesday night, even though I declined on Thursday, of course I welcome it. It's a pity we have to wait for the British government to move first, but I welcome the initiative. I think that Tony Blair was quite right to move the way he did yesterday, and of course that left our own government in a position that they just have to follow, but I'm glad that they have followed.
On day one of Mr Ahern's nationwide tour, he's visited 2 constituencies, but he's still got 39 more to go.
The Taoiseach tonight rejected the Fianna Fáil leader's suggestion that he was forced to permit today's talks once the British Premier had made a similar move. A spokesman for Mr Bruton said both leaders had discussed the issue last week.